Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Annette Young. In the fallout of Donald Trump's presidential victory, the Democratic Party in the US has been forced to do a massive rethink over its direction. One of those involved closely in this process is rising political star Liz Jaff, a campaign strategist. Having narrowly lost a bid for the party's vice chair, she's now a member of its Transition Advisory Committee and joins me in the studio today. Liz, thank you for giving us some of your time.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Now, just tell me, on the morning of Wednesday, November 9th in 2016, you woke up facing the reality of a Trump victory. What were your first thoughts?
Well, I was in Columbus, Ohio. We'd been doing Get Out the Vote for Hillary, and the first thoughts were what just happened. I mean, it was just complete shock, and I think we knew that from the polls, right? People were saying, oh, she was going to win, this is going to be fine. I'm coming in from the East Coast, so I think, how could anybody vote for Donald Trump? And you have this moment of realization. I think it was about 3 a.m. when it locked in. And the first thing is, oh my gosh. The second moment is, what the hell are we going to do? And I think people were flooded with both anger and fear and confusion, right? Who would have voted for him? How could they do this? I think the country went through a huge separation. The second level of that was unity, and we saw that in the Women's March, right? That was just one of the most incredible. I didn't see that since Obama was inaugurated, and I was there. But seeing everybody flood there, including in Europe, right? Including in Africa, people were flooding to kind of unify. That was the beginning of an emerging group that's coming in, resisting Trump, but also talking to each other. So it's been interesting.
Was it ground zero, though, for the Democrats?
Absolutely. Absolutely ground zero, because I think the Democrats, you know, and I'm a Democrat, and we're kind of committed, had a moment where we said, is the message working? Are the candidates working? Are we reaching out correctly? And the answer was no. And so there was this ground zero where we said, we need to get back together and fix this.
Now, the Trump presidency is certainly pushing the party towards a sort of new kind of clarity, but it appears there still is a lot of argument over which direction. Do you see it, for instance, going further towards the left, given the popularity of what Bernie Sanders campaigned on?
I think what's interesting is that the Democrats are like a family. They're going to continuously disagree, but at the end of the day, we need to be electing the right kind of Democrats. What you're seeing right now is we're airing out the laundry. So there are some really interesting things happening with the Unity Commission, right? With Hillary's now doing her book tour, Bernie Sanders is mobilizing people for Bernie and Our Revolution. But what you're seeing is that people are starting to activate like they've never activated before. We were talking about this earlier, but there's a great bumper sticker that says, "Thank you, Trump, you made me an activist." So I do think that we are trying to come together at a party, and we are, right? We have a lot of fights, but we're starting to agree with each other.
But is it in disarray, as the American media keeps reporting?
I've got to be honest with you, I don't think it is. And I'm really going to push back on that quite a bit. First of all, the DCCC is raising more money than they ever have before. It's looking like we're going to be running Democrats across the board in every single election for 2018. The fact that we're getting as close as we're getting in Montana and Georgia, and if you look at what's happening in Alabama and Tennessee right now, we're moving forward. Right? We're mobilizing millennials that we haven't done for ages. I mean, look at me. I ran for DNC vice chair. We're stepping up. So I think the media has a great time in saying nothing's working, they're in disarray, because it resonates. But that's not the fact. When you go in there, people are building things. It's just going to take some time. And that's frustrating, but we're absolutely moving towards something that I think is going to be a huge success.
Yet the Democrats, as far as we see it, are the traditional defenders of healthcare, of education, of climate protection. Why is it that they've been unable to exploit, these issues on the part of the party? Why do they seem to be all over the shop in terms of standing up against Trump and his administration?
Well, I think the major issue here is that there's a national message versus a local message, right? And I think that we got a lot of pushback for just having national messages, right? Climate change, healthcare. What we need to talk about is, how does this pertain to the everyday family? And we lost touch with that a bit. And so you're seeing that reemerge with kind of knock every door, where people are talking to everybody, Democrats and Republicans, who are saying, are you going to be happy with Trump? What's he doing? We lost touch with that, and we're reconnecting with it. So I actually think that we're going to be shifting. And we weren't speaking to voters because we were on this national plane and not going into Michigan, going into Pennsylvania, and actually talking to people.
But even still, is it the fact that the party is recovering, is taking away a lot of the energy towards what they should be doing politically as they try and rebuild?
Well, so I think what's interesting is when you say the party, right? There are more Democrats than Republicans running for office. those are Democrats, right? That is the party. We have 16,000 women running for office. This has never happened before. And guess what? They're Democrats. And so that's the party, right? We have about 25 emerging groups that are suddenly calling people to run for office. We have new tools being built for Democrats. That's the party. So when people talk about the party is not only the DNC, it's every single one of the Democrats that are emerging up. And what the DNC is forming is a hub where people can talk to each other, fight with each other, but essentially elect Democrats. So that's where I push back on the media. The party is merging and rising stronger than ever.
But you're also talking there, Liz, about the fact that there are many different groups and also the fact that you need to bring them together. You need to get everybody onto the same page, don't you?
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's what's going to be the most important thing is coalition building. And I'll say this, if you look at what Tom Perez did in the Department of Labor and you look at Jess O'Connell, who's come in as the CEO, they do bring people together. It is not a job you want to wish on anybody because it's going to be tough as hell, but they are doing it, right? So the fact that I'm sitting at the advisory committee, right, and I can be very controversial and different, but I'm sitting there with somebody from the Clinton campaign and someone from the Bernie campaign, right? And an activist and somebody who was almost in the Green Party but isn't. That's huge. And we are all around the table making suggestions, but we're also doing things, right? You can't just talk about it, you have to act. I do think they're doing something in a coalition building way, which I feel hugely positive about, and that's what you're starting to see in elections.
Do you think, though, that the old guard feels threatened?
Of course. But I think that's okay because threat kind of wakes you up to say, either I've got to adapt, I've got to change, or I've got to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think transparency is a huge part of this that we saw from 2016, where people kind of said, well, if you're not showing me, it's nefarious. Often it's not that, it's just people don't know how to be transparent. And in the age of the internet, right, one of the biggest issues we found is people didn't want to put, how do you run for DNC chair and vice chair on the internet? And so one of the things I did when I was running is I just put it all up online. And people were really horrified at first, but then they were like, oh, okay, this isn't tough. It's just a culture change. And I think we have to allow for that culture change to happen and be patient a little bit with it, but also push it. So I think the old guard, I think there's a little bit of threat, but they're also kind of fired up, right?
Now, as the host of the 51%, I cannot talk to you without talking about the treatment of Hillary Clinton during the election campaign. There was an interview with the Supreme Court Judge, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, recently, who talked about the fact to Time magazine that there clearly was major sexism involved. What are your thoughts?
First of all, yes, 100% yes, yes, yes. When we talk to women about running for office, it's so fascinating. I'm currently working with an executive who's going to be running for a statewide office position. And the feedback she got from polling was, you should cut your hair because it doesn't look professional. You should wear a suit because you don't look like you're running a business. You should wear heels. Right? That's just a basic thing. We're telling women to run for office, but we are tearing them down at every single level. We're setting them up with no resources, and we're not being inclusive. I mean, Hillary Clinton is a bastion for getting through that. If you look at her in those interviews in the 70s where she's like, I'm not going to change my name. I may not have kids. It's going to be okay. She got eviscerated. And to be honest with you, consultants were dominated by men. So how do we change that? We become consultants, women. We start to talk to our candidates and say, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you wear. Start fixing it. But we have to push back. And so I'm 100% with you. Was there sexism? Absolutely. How do we fight it? We don't fight it by kind of complaining about it. We fight it by getting into the fight, running ourselves and running other female candidates.
Who are the women to watch, in your opinion, in the party? Who should we be looking at?
I mean, you're going to hear all the same candidates from me as from others. Obviously, Kamala Harris is somebody who's very exciting. I think Sherry Bustos, who's running again in Congress in Illinois, is an incredible candidate to watch. There are some really interesting women who are running in Oakland Assembly that are going to be fascinating as well. Obviously, everybody's looking at Elizabeth Warren. What is she doing next, right? But I think the women to watch, to be very fair and honest with you, are the women who are starting to run for state races. So across the board, you're seeing a lot of women run for state representative. Those are the women we should be watching. And so I think Emily's List and Emerge are playing a much bigger role. I mean, they're rebuilding because they have no way to deal with all the capacity that's coming in. There's some incredible women running in Georgia. The whole field right now is dominated by women. There's 2 female candidates running for governor. I mean, this is unheard of. And so we have about 35 governor's races next year. We have women running in 50%, potentially more than that. And so we need to focus on the surge, but we need to also focus on the new woman running for office in the local legislature.
Now, your great aunt was Helen Suzman, the first woman in the South African Parliament to stand up against apartheid and fight for Nelson Mandela's freedom. Clearly, you've got political involvement and activism running through your blood. I'm just curious to know what next for you, Liz Jaff, because you narrowly missed, didn't you,
Yes.
becoming the vice chair of the party?
Yes. You know, I actually think that was also incredible because it allowed me the ability to start working with the DNC. And when we talk about how it's changing, the fact that they reached out and said, all right, let's look at your platform is great. What's next for me, I think recruitment is the most important thing we should be focusing on in America right now. Because if people believe in the candidates that are running, they're going to turn out. And what that means for me is more women and people of color running for office. And so sometimes you have to go and really break a lot of barriers to do that. But that's really what I want to focus on. The other thing is technology and tools, right? Barriers to entry.
That's vital, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that you come from a tech background and you have to marry all these political activism with online technology.
Well, technology is wonderful because it neutralizes, right? So we're all going to fight about the message, but we don't fight about the fact that everybody needs access to be able to run for office, to learn about the candidates, to vote. And so we can take technology in a place where we can't really, you know, we may not agree with each other on the message, but we could say, here's what you need to do to get out the vote. Here's what you need to do to run. Here's what you need to do to raise money to run for office. And for me, what's very personal is breaking those barriers. So it's not just people with huge access to capital running, right? Or from the old boys club. Because we know that there are certain types of people that run for office because they have access to wealth and they have a huge male network. We have to break that. And that happens in the internet. One of the most exciting things happening right now on Twitter is people that are running for office are getting funding from people across the country because they're seeing them. That's amazing. So people can hate on Twitter a lot, but you can also love it. For me, I want to focus on breaking those barriers. So the people should run for office, not based on wealth, but based on the fact that they're good people. They live in those communities and they've been fighting for them constantly. So that's what I'm going to focus on.
Finally, do you think the Democrats are capable of bouncing back in next year's midterm elections?
100%. That's why I'm a Democrat and I always will be a Democrat. It's on our side. The right is on our side. If you look at Trump and what he's doing right now, I see a lot of Republicans coming to our side and moderates because this is not the way to be with a country. This is the United States of America, and I think the Democrats are on the right side of history right now.
Liz Jaff, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And that's it for the France 24 interview. Do stay with us here because there'll be more news and headlines coming up very shortly.